Hey guys, so this is going to be a lesson about the slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines. And if your equation is written in slope-intercept form, that's our y equals mx plus b form, it's really easy to pick out the slope, right? Because it's m. So if I have three equations that look like this, and I want to know, okay, well, which ones of these lines are parallel? Well, pick out the slope, pick out the slope, pick out the slope, and let's compare slopes. Parallel lines are going to have the same slope, okay? Because see how they're both going downhill by, down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. They both have that same downhill slope. That's what makes them parallel. So I can tell this one and this one have the same slope. So those are the two that are going to be parallel. So I can tell without even putting them on a graph. Of course, if they were on a graph, it'd be easy to tell. But I can tell just by looking at the equation because they have the same slope. Okay? Now, perpendicular lines, they definitely do not have the same slope, right? In order to know if they cross exactly perpendicular to each other, then they have to have what we call opposite reciprocal slopes. Opposite reciprocal. And the opposite means opposite sign, right? And reciprocal is where you flip your fraction over, right? So if I were to look at these three equations, pick out your slopes. Here's a slope, here's a slope, here's a slope. Okay, these two are opposite signs, but they are not reciprocal. These two are opposite signs and they are reciprocal because this one is 3 over 1, which essentially flips to be 1 over 3. So you want them to be flips of each other and opposite signs, okay? Like these two are reciprocals, but they're not opposite signs, right? So you want them to be both. You want them to be opposite signs and reciprocal. Okay, so you can see on the graph, it's easy to tell that these are perpendicular to each other, but if you don't have a graph, that's what you want to look for is opposite reciprocal slopes. Now, sometimes we have equations of lines that don't follow that fun little y equals mx plus b format, right? Sometimes we have our lovely Vux-Hoy lines, right? So something like this that doesn't follow the format, if it's a y equals equation, that's a Hoy line, that means the slope is 0, okay? This one has a slope of 3 because I can tell that's in the m position of y equals mx plus b. This one is also in the y equals mx plus b format, so it's just that our b value is 0. So this one has a slope of 3. This one, that takes on the Hoy format, so it has a slope of 0. So when it says identify which lines are parallel, well, these two lines are parallel because they both have a slope of 3, right? But in addition, these two lines are parallel because they both have a slope of 0. So those are also parallel. Okay, so even though I haven't put them on a graph, these are both Hoy lines, so they're both horizontal lines. So I know that those are going to be parallel. And then these both have a slope of rise 3, run 1. So they're going to be parallel. Okay, let's look at this one, trying to find which lines are perpendicular. Again, look at your slope. This is not our typical y equals mx plus b format. It is a Hoy line, so it has a 0 slope. This one does take on the y equals mx plus b format. So here's my slope of this one, 1/8. This one's a Vux line. So it actually has an undefined slope. And then this one, y equals mx plus b. Okay, so I have the 8 as the slope. And so when you're first looking at this, you might think, oh, these two are perpendicular. Well, they are reciprocals, but they are not opposite signs, and they have to be both. They have to be reciprocals, 1 over 8 and 8 over 1, but they have to be opposite signs. One of these needs to be negative and one of them positive. So these are actually not perpendicular. Well, think about this. If I have a Hoy line, that's a horizontal line with a slope of 0, and I have a Vux line, which is a vertical line with slope undefined, aren't those perpendicular? I mean, they don't follow that whole opposite reciprocal idea, but they are perpendicular lines, right? So just keep in mind, if you have something like that, a Vux and a Hoy line, they are perpendicular. Okay, so those were perpendicular lines. It doesn't always follow the rules, the format of the rules. Technically, if you had 0 slope, that would be like 0 over 1. And if you think of the opposite reciprocal of 0 over 1, it would be negative 1 over 0, which that really is undefined because you can't have 0 on the bottom of a fraction. So technically, it is like they are opposite reciprocals. We just don't usually think of it like that. Okay, remember slope formula, because sometimes if you have 2 points rather than the equation of the line, you can still find the slope. So I can do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, and I can find the slope of the line containing these points. So slope would equal 17 minus 4 over negative 5 minus a negative 2, which of course would change to a plus 2. So I'm going to get 13 on top and negative 3 on the bottom, right? So again, whenever we're dealing with slope, don't change it to an improper fraction. Keep it don't change it to a mixed number. Keep it an improper fraction because that's your rise over run. Okay, you could say negative 13 over positive 3 instead of 13 over negative 3. You can't have a negative on both the top and the bottom. It could be on the top or on the bottom or out to the side. So write the slope of a line parallel to this line. Well, parallel has to have the same slope. So the same slope as this would be negative 13 thirds, right? Again, the negative can be on the top or the bottom or out to the side. That's all the same slope. But what would a perpendicular slope look like? Well, it's got to be flipped, so we got to do the reciprocal, and it's got to be opposite sign. So since this one was negative, the opposite sign would be positive. So this would be opposite reciprocal slope. So perpendicular slope would be 3/13, but the parallel slope would be negative 13 thirds. Okay, thanks guys.